Nick, you'd mentioned that you use lab-grown gems. There's been a lot of controversy about that. Do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Well, we only offer two laboratory-grown crystal materials, and we only offer them as an alternative to their natural counterparts. We have obviously natural emerald and natural ruby for sale, and if a person has the budget for them, and it's a very healthy one, and it doesn't sacrifice the quality of the other stones in procuring them, then by all means they're welcome to get them. However, there are pitfalls to both emerald and ruby. With the ruby especially, I'll never forget a conversation I had with a leading gemologist in Thailand many years ago, and I said to her that in my opinion 99% of all rubies were heat treated to near melting point to enhance the color and to melt the inclusions, which is a very common jewelry practice, jewelry industry practice to make a great profit. And she looked at me, I'll never forget her look, she looked at me almost in pity because she was a specialist in rubies, and that was a big part of her job. And she said, that's absolutely ridiculous. Don't think it's 99%. She said it's at least 99.9% of all rubies are heat treated in extreme temperatures to enhance them. And I just realized that there are a lot of people selling natural rubies, claiming them to be unheated, untreated, unenhanced, untampered with, unsuper fried as it were, and they're believing that they're getting this very Satwick ruby, which is very clean and as Mother Nature has provided, when it's not the case. And the trouble with this situation is that when you do enhance a ruby, if there aren't specific signs visible under a microscope, you cannot tell that it's been heated. You cannot tell, and I prefer the term super fried, because they've been melted at such a high temperature that it can literally warp the atomic lattice, the molecular alignment in the red corundum, which is what ruby is. And so giving that information out and understanding the implications of it, it seemed morally ethical to analyze any alternatives, be it red spinel, pink tourmaline, to a very great lesser degree red garnet, as an alternative substitute. However, the very best substitute is always born of being a similar stone of the hardest nature. And at that time there were these pioneers, two women, who had perfected the process of imitating Mother Nature by creating an environment where a ruby crystal could grow in an oven that was a perfect environment to grow rubies that were clean and unencumbered with inclusions. So I looked into that. I analyzed the scientifically measurable gemological qualities between the natural ruby and the laboratory-grown ruby. The laboratory-grown ruby can take up to 8 months to grow, sometimes longer depending on the size. It's an extremely expensive process. A huge amount of high temperature is needed. And once grown and cut, unless certain things are done to it, it is impossible to tell the difference. And a lot of natural rubies have been sold, or rather a lot of rubies have been sold as natural that in fact are laboratory-grown rubies on the market today, and it's something that obviously gemologists don't want to promote because it's a bit like saying they can't fix the problem, they're not qualified to deal with it. So I rationalized that if the crystal structure, the hardness, the refractive index, the pleochroism, the chemical composition, the many of the other atomically measurable characteristics of the crystal were the same, then who was I to say they're man-made. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's extremely arrogant, actually, to say that something's man-made when man didn't make it. The laws of nature made the laboratory-grown crystal rubies. Man made the environment that allowed the laws of nature to develop. And an analogy that I often have used is if you get a tomato seed and you put it in a greenhouse and you add the compost and the drip feed system, and you've really grown a tomato in a laboratory, and you've used a natural seed that can be used also in laboratory grown crystal to just grow bigger. And so of course when the difference in price is about 1/50th, and when the quality is so, I'll say, almost identical, and the testimonial feedback is seemingly no different, then it's definitely something that I like to offer as a service. And there are people who will, for aesthetic reasons, disdain that viewpoint, and I'll say, be my guest, buy a natural ruby. But the rationale is based on economics and scientific rationale, and not on supposition or aesthetic appeal. And so I started this process, and I was vigorously attacked by other astrological gem dealers, who, by the way, now sell laboratory-grown crystals, a lot of them. Vigorously attacked by everyone as a great way of chopping my head off to make me look smaller, perhaps, to promote their own agenda. However, something that really was a turning point of satisfaction for me in this arena some years ago was, there's a great saint by the name of Amaji, or Mata Mritananda Mahima, who had agreed and permitted with the logic of selling laboratory-grown emeralds in her organization for astrological purposes. And I felt that if there was ever an authority with someone who had a consciousness to understand the situation from the other side beyond pure logic and science, it would be her. And so I use her as a very great compliment to having decided that was the right course to take. And I could also go into the fact that a lot of natural emeralds are incredibly included and heat treated and pressure filled, enhanced in a way where you can't see their inclusions even under a microscope, and that people are spending a huge amount of money for very included gems. And there's a balance here. Is it worth it? I might also like to say that recently rubies and emeralds have come down in price dramatically, and I always predicted that and saw that because of this recent recession. The very high-end stones are the ones that come down, especially when they've been sold at inflated prices, which is what emeralds and rubies have been. Not the yellow sapphires, because they're not inflated, or the blues as much. And I'm glad I haven't promoted those from a value basis, value for money basis. But the argument and the logic of the rationale is on the website in far greater detail than I've explained. But the greatest thing is they are far too enhanced, and when the crystal structure has inclusions, which emeralds predominantly have, the atomic alignment doesn't allow for the electron transfer and the polarity of the molecular structure, which means when you have a magnet, the reason why it has that magnetic influence, ceramic or iron magnet, is because the ions in the molecular structure are in alignment, and it's been tuned by an electric current. With a crystal, it's very similar. There's a lot of unique qualities to both of those materials. And when the gem is being melted or superheated or naturally has great inclusions like the emerald, I doubt they're really worth buying. And most people can't afford the ones that are of the quality that laboratory-grown ones offer. And I believe they're really the only ones that make the difference significantly. And that's one of the reasons why I did what I believed in.